"You don't belong here, loser." My mother said it in the middle of dinner. My father didn't correct her. My brother kept eating. I picked up the plates, carried them to the sink, and washed the dishes the same way I had done every night for more than 10 years. They kept their focus on the meal and each other, acting like the air in the room had not shifted at all. After I wiped the last plate dry, I walked to my room, packed a single suitcase, and booked the earliest bus out of town. 3 weeks later, they posted online, asking strangers to help them find me. I grew up in Fairpoint, a small town in western Iowa. People there remember birthdays, know their neighbors, and talk about each other more than they should. My parents worked at the same grocery store for most of their lives. They never moved, never changed jobs, never questioned routine. I was the only one in the family who left for college and came back with a degree in supply chain management. Returning home had felt right back then. I didn't want to be the child who disappeared from her family. I took a job at Northline Logistics, the only large distribution company within a 30-mile radius. The pay was steady. The hours were predictable. It covered groceries, utilities, car insurance, and medical appointments. My parents' finances were unstable, so I sent them most of my paycheck. Over time, it became normal for me to cover the mortgage shortfall, overdue bills, and my brother's textbooks. I dedicated nearly 80% of my income to the household. No one forced me. I made that choice because the alternative, watching them struggle, felt worse. When my brother Ethan got a work visa and flew to Canada, things changed. He stayed abroad for 3 years, sent money home once or twice, and returned last summer with savings and a fiancé. My parents welcomed him with pride. They hadn't seen him in years, and they treated everything he did as evidence of success. He offered to renovate the kitchen as a gift. They accepted immediately. They forgot the years I had covered their debt payments after Dad's surgery. They forgot the nights I took the car to pick them up from the emergency room. They forgot the months I worked overtime just to keep the heat on in winter. I noticed the shift in tone right away. They didn't insult me in the beginning. They simply acted as if what I provided no longer counted. When I handed Mom cash for groceries, she called it a little help, even though it was half my paycheck. When I paid the utility bills, she said, "Well, Ethan already bought new cabinets, so it's fair." It wasn't anger, it was a dismissal. The kind that comes from people who assume your contributions aren't worth acknowledging. The comments escalated after I reduced the amount I sent home. I had started taking night classes to earn a second certification and had medical appointments for a skin condition that required ongoing treatment. My expenses increased, and the money I gave them decreased. I explained this clearly. They didn't care. Dad told me I was turning selfish. Mom said I was making excuses. Each time the conversation ended with them comparing me to Ethan. The night everything snapped, I came home from work at 6:30. Dinner was already on the table, roast chicken potatoes and steamed carrots. Ethan and his fiancée were visiting again. My parents were cheerful, talking about paint colors and countertop samples. They barely noticed when I walked in. I sat down quietly, served myself, and ate while they talked around me. Mom looked at Ethan and laughed about something from his trip abroad. Then she turned to me unexpectedly. "Madison, why do you always look so tired? It's depressing. No wonder you never move forward in life." I didn't respond. Dad put down his fork. "She's always been sensitive. Don't take it personally. They spoke about me as if I weren't there." 10 minutes later, Mom pushed her chair back. "You know what bothers me? When I look at you, Maddie, I don't see ambition. I see someone stuck, the poorest one in the family, and you act like we should be grateful you pay a few bills." Ethan's fiancée glanced at me uncomfortable. Ethan didn't speak. Dad added, "She's right. You don't belong in this house anymore if you're not going to pull your weight." Then he went back to eating. Mom threw the comment out like it was normal conversation. The silence from both men became the only answer I needed. I stood up, collected the plates, and took them to the sink. My hands stayed steady while I washed each dish. I dried them and returned the silverware to the drawer. My parents kept talking about the remodel. They didn't ask where I was going when I walked down the hall. Inside my room, I locked the door. I pulled a suitcase from the closet and packed 3 tops, 2 pairs of jeans, underwear, medication, and my work laptop. I added a folder with personal documents, passport, birth certificate, and employment files. I didn't take childhood photos or sentimental items. I didn't take anything that reminded me of obligation. At 9:15, I booked a one-way bus ticket to Seattle leaving at dawn. It wasn't a plan. It was the first city with available seats. I chose it because it wasn't Iowa. The entire house was silent when I zipped the suitcase. I slept in 10-minute intervals, waiting for regret to hit. It didn't. The only thing I felt was a sense of release I hadn't experienced in years. At 5 in the morning, I carried the suitcase to my car and drove away. I didn't leave a note. I didn't answer the phone when Mom called at 7. I didn't read the long text Dad sent at 10:30, asking why the rent hadn't been transferred. By evening, they had sent 6 messages ranging from irritation to panic. 3 weeks later, I saw the Facebook post, "Please, if anyone sees her, tell her we need her home." A photo of me smiling at age 22 sat above the caption. It didn't match the person who had walked out with one suitcase. They weren't worried about my safety. They were worried about losing what I provided. That night in Seattle, I sat on a borrowed mattress in a rented room and read the post twice. I didn't respond. I didn't contact anyone. I didn't explain myself. I wasn't missing. I had finally walked away. The bus pulled into downtown Seattle just after noon. The sky was overcast, the air cold and damp in a way Iowa never was. I stepped onto the sidewalk with my suitcase and stopped for a moment, unsure of where to go. The station was noisy and people moved quickly around me. No one looked at me twice. That anonymity eased the transition more than I expected. I searched for a short-term room on my phone and found a rented basement space in Beacon Hill. The photos looked plain but clean. The price was low enough that I could manage it until my first paycheck arrived, assuming the company allowed me to work remotely. The host responded within minutes and said the room was available immediately. I ordered a rideshare, climbed in, and watched unfamiliar streets pass as we left downtown. The house sat on a quiet block with older trees and narrow sidewalks. The host, a man in his 50s named George, handed me the key and walked downstairs to show me the space. The room contained a mattress, a small desk, and a single lamp. The bathroom was shared with 2 other tenants I had not met yet. Nothing about it felt permanent, which was exactly what I needed. I placed my suitcase in the corner and sat on the mattress. The exhaustion settled in quickly. My body felt heavy from 12 hours on a bus, but my mind stayed alert, already planning the next steps. The first task was calling my supervisor. I drafted a message before dialing, outlining my situation in simple terms. No details about family, no emotional information, nothing that could complicate my employment. When she answered, I explained that I had relocated unexpectedly, but could continue meeting deadlines and maintain full availability. She paused for several seconds before asking if I was safe. I confirmed that I was. She approved remote work for the next 30 days and said the company would evaluate a permanent arrangement later. Relief came quickly. I kept it private. With work secured, I bought groceries, bread, eggs, peanut butter, apples, and instant coffee. Nothing that required equipment I did not have. Back in the room, I ate an apple and opened my laptop to review upcoming tasks. Moving forward in small, logical steps was the only way to avoid thinking about the house in Iowa. By evening, the basement grew colder. The walls made faint noises whenever someone upstairs walked across the floor. I kept my jacket on and sat at the small desk, completing emails and shipment reports for the distribution center. The routine felt familiar, predictable. Work remained the one area of life untouched by the last 24 hours. The silence between tasks left space for thoughts I did not want. The dinner table came back in pieces. My mother's voice. My father's indifference. Ethan refused to look at me. Each memory arrived without emotion at first. That came later, slower, like steam rising after the stove is turned off. I did not cry. The sadness never reached that level. What I felt instead was a steady confirmation that leaving had been necessary. At 9:30, George knocked on the door to check if I had everything I needed. His tone was neutral. He did not ask questions. I appreciated that more than anything else that day. When he left, I locked the door and lay on the mattress, fully clothed. The room smelled faintly of detergent. Rain started outside around midnight, steady and rhythmic. Sleep came in short intervals again. Each time I woke up, I checked my phone. A habit formed from years of responding to messages from home. No notifications appeared. That break in pattern startled me more than the silence the night before. By morning, there were still no missed calls, no texts, nothing from the people who had demanded updates from me every week for more than a decade. I ate toast and prepared for a remote shift. At 8 o'clock, I logged on to the morning meeting. The team greeted me normally, unaware that I was 2,000 miles from my usual desk. I listened to updates on warehouse delays and inbound freight issues. It was simple to answer questions and assign tasks. For those 40 minutes, my life looked unchanged from the outside. During lunch, I walked around the neighborhood to stay awake. The houses were older, with narrow porches and small gardens. I tried to picture myself living in any of them, but stopped. Long-term plans required stability I did not have. My phone buzzed once. A message from a coworker asking if I would join a project review later in the week. Still nothing from my family. The absence of contact continued through the afternoon. No irritation, no demands, no reminders about bills. The silence felt intentional, not accidental. I recognized the pattern. When they wanted something, communication was constant. When they were angry, they pulled away. This was the second category. Near 5:30, I closed my laptop and sat on the edge of the bed. The room was quiet, except for the heater coming on. I tried to decide what bothered me more, the years I had carried responsibility alone, or the speed with which they adjusted to my absence when the money stopped. A knock on the door interrupted the thought. One of the other tenants introduced herself. Her name was Lauren. She lived upstairs but used the basement laundry room. She asked if the noise bothered me and offered to switch her schedule if it did. Her politeness felt unfamiliar after the previous night's conversation at home. I told her it was fine. She smiled, thanked me, and left. The exchange lasted less than a minute, but it stayed with me longer than it should have. At 7, I reheated a cup of instant noodles and reviewed rental listings. The prices were higher than I expected. My savings could cover 2 months at most. I made a list of the neighborhoods with lower costs and drafted a budget. Transportation, food, rent, medication, and essential spending. No room for emergencies. I would need a second job soon. The first message from home arrived at 9:15, a short text from my father asking where the rent transfer was. Nothing about last night, nothing about whether I had left safely, only the missing payment. I set the phone down and did not respond. Another message came half an hour later, this time from my mother. She asked why I had left the house in such a dramatic way. She said it was childish. She added that Ethan and his fiancée were confused and uncomfortable with the tension I had created. Again, not a word about her comment at dinner. I read the texts twice, let them sit on the screen, and then turned the phone face down. No reply, no explanation, no attempt to correct their version of events. There was nothing to salvage in that conversation. Over the next 2 days, the tone of their messages shifted from annoyance to anxiety. They asked neighbors if I had returned to the house. They contacted my workplace. They reached out to distant relatives. I kept my phone silent and finished my tasks, logged into meetings, walked to the store, and studied rental prices. The routine steadied me. On the 4th morning, I woke to a series of notifications. My mother had posted a photo on her social media page, a picture of me from college smiling on a hiking trail. The caption asked strangers for help locating me. It claimed I had disappeared and might be in danger. Comments from acquaintances expressed concern. A few people shared the post. I stared at the screen for several minutes. The post framed them as worried parents searching for a missing daughter. It left the dinner table. It left out the insults. It left out the years of bills paid with my income. It left out the suitcase packed in silence. My name circulated online as someone who needed to be found. They were not worried about my safety. They were worried about losing the person who had spent 10 years carrying responsibilities no one else wanted. I closed the app, placed the phone on the desk, and opened my laptop for work. The rented room stayed cold. The rain outside continued. Nothing about the situation felt dramatic or emotional. It was simply the next step in placing distance between who I had been and who I planned to become. The first thing I did after seeing the social media post was disable location services on every app I used. I went through each setting, carefully making sure nothing shared data automatically. My family had a habit of asking questions until they found answers. Silence would only make them search harder. Reducing the digital trail was necessary. I also created a new email address. My original inbox contained years of forwarded bills, bank reminders, and medical scheduling notices that my mother had insisted on monitoring. Separating my accounts was overdue. The new email held nothing except shipping updates from the online store and job-related messages. That clean slate helped me stay organized while I figured out what came next. The basement room remained cold throughout the week. The thin walls made it easy to hear footsteps from upstairs, but the noise never bothered me. It reminded me that other people were going about their day without expecting anything from me. That contrast was comforting. At home, the quiet only meant someone was waiting for me to speak, fix something, or pay for something. During work breaks, I searched for better housing. Most listings were too expensive, so I focused on places farther from the city center. Burien, Renton, and Kent had lower prices, but they added commute time. A remote job solved that problem, but I knew the company could change its policy at any point. I needed a stable plan in case they required on-site work. Around noon that day, my supervisor requested a brief call. I expected questions about productivity or attendance, but the conversation went differently. She said the company was restructuring and that my department might transition to hybrid scheduling within the next 6 months. Just a heads up, she added. I know you moved recently. I want you to have time to prepare. Her directness helped. It gave me a timeline rather than uncertainty. I thanked her and returned to the spreadsheet I had been updating. That evening, I walked to a community center nearby. The building offered free job workshops, English classes, and housing resources. I signed up for 2 sessions, one on budgeting, another on renters' rights in Washington state. The registration took less than 5 minutes. No one asked about my background, and no one implied my situation was unusual. People moved in and out of the center for countless reasons. I appreciated being treated like any other resident making practical decisions. After returning to the basement, I made dinner, eggs, and toast again and reviewed the notes from the budgeting workshop. The instructor emphasized separating savings into categories: emergencies, long-term goals, and monthly necessities. My savings were small, but dividing them made the goal feel more structured. I wrote amounts next to each category and adjusted the numbers until they matched my income. The structure helped settle the noise in my mind. The next morning, a message from my father appeared. He asked why I was ignoring them. He wrote that neighbors were worried. He added that posting online was the only way to make sure people were looking out for me. The message avoided addressing the tone he had used at dinner. It ignored the dismissal that had pushed me out of the house. It reframed their choices as protective, not controlling. I set the phone down without answering. Work assignments increased that week, which helped. The warehouse had several delayed shipments, and I coordinated schedules between different distribution points. The tasks required accuracy and fast decisions. Staying focused kept me from reading the messages piling up on my phone. When the shift ended, I closed my laptop and went outside for fresh air. The walk took me toward a hill overlooking the city. The view showed buildings layered in gray light with the water in the distance. The skyline did not mean anything to me yet, but standing there helped me understand the difference between leaving something and arriving somewhere. Iowa had been familiar but restrictive. Seattle was unfamiliar, but it gave me distance. That distance was necessary to break patterns I had accepted for too long. On the 4th day, I researched part-time weekend jobs. Most positions paid minimum wage, but the extra income would extend my savings. A grocery store near Rainier Avenue offered night shifts, and a small packaging company listed temporary roles for Saturday mornings. I applied to both. The forms were simple. Upload a resume, answer basic questions, and wait. Later that afternoon, my mother left a voicemail. Her tone was sharp, not worried. She said my absence created responsibility gaps. She mentioned that the electricity bill was overdue. She implied that my brother and his fiancée were uncomfortable visiting the house because of the tension I caused. She ended by saying, "You cannot just disappear when you feel like it." The message confirmed what I already suspected. They did not want me home. They wanted the money and the labor I had provided for years. They wanted the certainty that someone else would absorb every inconvenience. Hearing her voice made it easier to stay silent. That night, Lauren knocked again. She came to do laundry and apologized for the noise in advance. We talked briefly in the hallway. She asked how long I planned to stay in Seattle. I said I did not know yet. She nodded as if that answer was normal. "It takes time to figure out your rhythm here," she said before returning to the washer. The comment stayed with me. It was simple, but it acknowledged that starting over required time, not justification. The next morning, one of the part-time employers called. The packaging company wanted someone for immediate weekend shifts. The pay was modest, but guaranteed. I accepted. The manager gave me the address and a start time. Another step toward stability. I spent the rest of the day reviewing my long-term timeline. 3 months to secure better housing, 6 months to prepare for possible hybrid work, 12 months to build enough savings to stop relying on fragile plans. Every deadline had tasks attached. That structure reduced the overwhelm that came from changing everything at once. By the end of the week, the social media post about me had gained traction. Several people commented claiming they saw someone who might be me at a bus station or a grocery store. None of them were accurate. The comments felt like background noise rather than threats. It was strange watching strangers speculate about my life. They had opinions about what might have driven me to leave. They offered theories about family conflict. They expressed pity. They expressed judgment. I ignored all of it. What mattered was that the plan in front of me made sense. The days were long, but they moved in a clear direction. Each choice pushed me further from the life I had carried alone for too many years. On Sunday evening, I sat at the desk reviewing Monday's workload. The basement hummed from the heater, and the rain had slowed to a drizzle. My phone lit up once more, another message from Iowa, this time from a distant cousin who said my parents were beside themselves. The description did not match the voices in the voicemails. They were frustrated, not afraid. They were inconvenienced, not concerned. I powered off the phone and placed it in the drawer next to the bed. There was nothing left to resolve with them. The distance gave me clarity. I had responsibilities now, finding stable housing, keeping my job, securing a second income, and maintaining the routines that supported my health. Starting over did not require dramatic gestures. It required consistency planning and the willingness to separate what was familiar from what was healthy. Seattle was not home yet, but it was a place where I could move without being pulled back into the same patterns. That was enough for the moment. The shipment delays at work increased, and my supervisor asked me to assist with a new distribution calendar. The task required tracking multiple supply routes and identifying gaps in scheduling. I opened 3 spreadsheets at once and mapped out each route. The job demanded focus, which helped keep everything else in the background. Accuracy mattered. Distraction created mistakes, so staying centered made sense. During the lunch break, I walked to a nearby cafe. The place was small, with 4 tables and a counter packed with pastries. The barista recognized me from the day before and asked if I wanted the same order. That brief detail felt unusual. In Iowa, most people remembered me only because of my parents. Here, someone remembered what I ordered because of direct interaction. It was a small change, but it stood out. After work, I searched for housing again. The listings updated quickly. Studios near Beacon Hill, South Seattle, and White Center appeared and disappeared within hours. Each option required fast communication with landlords. I sent messages and asked for availability dates. Some replied with automated responses. Others asked for proof of income. A few did not respond at all. A duplex listing in Tukwila caught my attention. The rent was manageable and utilities were included. The interior photos showed clean walls, a narrow kitchen, and a window with decent natural light. I emailed the landlord, introduced myself, and requested a viewing. He responded within 20 minutes with a time slot the next afternoon. That speed made the decision easy. I confirmed the appointment and reviewed the location on a map. Securing housing changed the entire structure of my planning. The basement room had served its purpose, but it was temporary. This place provided stability. The following morning, work proceeded calmly. The new distribution calendar was nearly complete, and the department manager approved the first draft. She asked for one more adjustment to align shipping routes with inventory levels. I updated the chart and sent the revision before lunch. She thanked me and said she appreciated the detail. Direct acknowledgement made a difference. It showed that accuracy mattered to someone, even if it was only in a professional setting. At 3 o'clock, I took the bus to Tukwila. The duplex sat on a quiet street lined with small lawns and parked cars. The area looked stable, not upscale, but well-maintained. The landlord, a man in his 60s, greeted me at the door. He showed the living space without unnecessary commentary. The kitchen had new cabinets and the windows opened smoothly. The heater worked. The space was small but functional and nothing felt neglected. When he asked about my move-in timeline, I answered clearly. He reviewed my paperwork on the spot. After a few minutes, he said the unit was mine if I wanted it. I agreed and signed the initial documents. The move-in date was set for the end of the month. Back at the basement, I reviewed packing needs. I had only one suitcase and a few bags. Moving would be simple. The clarity of the plan made the rest of the week easier to manage. I continued coordinating shipments and answering emails at work. The packaging job began on Saturday, and the shift moved steadily. The tasks were repetitive, labeling, sealing, and stacking. The pace was efficient, and the environment was quiet. No one asked personal questions. Employees clocked in, worked, and left. That predictability helped. Sunday afternoon, I walked through a grocery store near the duplex. I wanted to understand the prices and layout before moving. The store had a decent produce section and a section for household items. The familiarity of routine tasks like comparing prices and planning meals grounded me. These tasks were straightforward. They did not involve emotional negotiation or expectations from anyone else. That evening, another message appeared from my father. He asked when I planned to return. He mentioned bills again. He asked if I intended to abandon everything without responsibility. The message was direct and consistent with previous patterns. Nothing in his words acknowledged his role in the situation. Nothing indicated understanding or accountability. The tone confirmed that returning would not change anything. The same conditions would repeat if I stepped back into that environment. I closed the message and returned to the budgeting plan. The next month included moving fees, groceries, transit costs, and medical appointments. I entered the numbers into the spreadsheet and adjusted where needed. The structure brought clarity. Focusing on measurable tasks prevented emotional drift. On Monday, work shifted to inventory forecasting. The department had received new estimates from suppliers, and the schedules needed updating. The process involved calculating lead times and adjusting distribution routes to avoid shortages. I focused on the data, made the updates, and submitted the changes. The manager approved the accuracy, and the team implemented the new schedule. When the shift ended, I returned to the basement and packed non-essential items into 2 bags. I folded clothes and organized documents. The process took less than an hour. Everything I owned fit into a small space, which made the move straightforward. 2 days later, the landlord emailed the final lease agreement. I signed electronically and transferred the deposit. The confirmation appeared in my inbox within minutes. Having a fixed address provided structure to the next phase of my plans. It did not solve everything, but it removed one significant barrier. The rest of the week moved without interruption. The packaging job remained consistent. Work at the logistics company continued normally. My phone remained mostly silent, except for automated messages and appointment reminders. The gap between my old life and my current routine grew wider with each day. Near the end of the week, my supervisor scheduled a performance review. The call lasted 10 minutes. She said my work was precise and reliable. She asked whether I needed any equipment to help with remote tasks. I told her the laptop and software functioned well. She approved my status for the next quarter and ended the call. No tension, no indirect comments, no shifting expectations. The interaction was simple and professional. That evening, I walked through the neighborhood near the new duplex to evaluate noise levels, lighting, and bus routes. The area was quiet. A bus stop sat 2 blocks from the house. A small park sat across the street. People walked their dogs. Kids rode scooters. The environment looked stable. When I returned to the basement, I checked my phone again. Another message from home appeared. This time it came from a neighbor saying my parents were worried sick. The wording did not match their earlier messages. Their actions did not align with the description. Concern did not come in the form of demands or accusations. It came from clarity and responsibility. The contradiction was obvious. I powered off the phone again and set it aside. There was work to finish. There was an apartment to prepare for. There were routines forming that did not depend on pleasing anyone. The distance created room to think clearly. The next steps were practical: complete the move, maintain the jobs, and keep building a stable foundation. Seattle still felt unfamiliar, but it did not feel restrictive. Each day added structure. Each task created progress. Nothing required justification. Nothing required negotiation. For the first time in years, the decisions in front of me were mine alone. The move to the duplex happened on a clear Saturday morning. I placed my suitcase and 2 bags in the back seat of the rideshare car and watched the basement building shrink as we pulled away. The new place felt small but steady: plain walls, clean floors, a working heater, and no voices waiting for explanations. For the first time in months, I set my things down without rushing. I stood in the middle of the living room and let the quiet settle. Nothing demanded a reaction. Unpacking took less than an hour. 3 shirts in the drawer, jeans folded on a shelf, medication by the bathroom sink, documents under the bed. My belongings took up barely any space yet. The room felt more mine than the one I had lived in for years. When I walked to the grocery store later that afternoon, the cashier's short neutral, "Do you need a bag?" reminded me again that I was just another customer, not a problem to solve, not a role to fill, just a person paying for food. Work on Monday followed its usual rhythm: inventory updates, supplier schedules, and a new task from the team lead track, repeated damaged shipments. The numbers formed a clear pattern within a few hours, and when I sent the report, the acknowledgement was simple and direct. No deflection, no questions about whether I misunderstood anything. Working in an environment where my input was treated as valid felt almost strange. After logging out, I cooked a basic meal and organized the kitchen cabinet. The small movements: boiling water, wiping the counter, carried none of the tension they used to. I was no longer waiting for footsteps in the hallway or for someone to comment about what I should be doing. That night, my mother sent a message. She wrote that I embarrassed the family by leaving without notice, that I had abandoned responsibilities, and that she only made the comments at dinner because she was stressed. She said I was being dramatic. Nothing in her message reflected accountability. I read it once, let the words sit on the screen for a few seconds, and turned the phone face down. 2 days later, Ethan messaged. His tone was almost mechanical. He asked why I left. He said Mom and Dad were upset and confused, and that my timing was inconvenient because the kitchen remodel was falling behind schedule. His focus circled around the same pattern: avoid what happened, point towards something easier to discuss. I kept my reply short. I am safe. I am working. I need space. The following week, my supervisor assigned me to a cross-team project. The communication was structured and clear. People asked only necessary questions. No one spoke over anyone else. No one made comments disguised as jokes. The simplicity of this collaboration made me realize how much energy I had spent for years navigating conversations that were never neutral. On Saturday morning, I went to the clinic for a follow-up appointment for my skin condition. The doctor checked the progress, adjusted the medication, and explained what to do next. Her instructions were direct: apply twice a day, return in 4 weeks. She did not ask about my finances or comment on my appearance. She treated me like an adult managing a medical issue. That clarity made the appointment easier than I expected. During the bus ride home, my father sent a message. He asked if I planned to return for a family gathering that weekend, and said people would ask questions if I did not show up. He did not ask how I was doing. He did not ask if I was settled or safe. The message focused on public discomfort. I closed the text and watched the city outside the window. 2 days later, something happened that surprised me. My parents called me together, both names on the screen. The call rang for a long time. I let it go to voicemail. When I played the message, their tone was sharp. My mother said they had heard rumors about where I was living and asked if I planned to drag the family name down by staying away. My father said the neighbors were asking questions and that my silence made them look careless. I listened to the full message without reacting. Every sentence confirmed how little they understood about why I left. Later that week, the landlord came by to replace the smoke detector. He completed the task in under 5 minutes, nodded once, and left. No questions about my background, no probing curiosity, just a straightforward repair. It reminded me again how simple it could be when interactions were not layered with expectation. That evening, I sat at the small table by the window and opened my notebook. I wrote down the recent messages, the accusations, the reminders about appearances, the attempts to reframe my leaving as irresponsibility. Seeing everything in one place made the structure obvious. They were not reaching out to reconnect. They were reaching out to regain control. The distance did not erase the past, but it created a space where I could see it without distortion. Each time they tried to pull me back through guilt or inconvenience, the quiet of the duplex made the contrast clearer. The silence was not loneliness. It was a relief. It was the absence of being monitored. It was a kind of peace I had not realized I was missing. For the first time, the thought settled without hesitation. The life I was building here, slow, steady, quiet, was worth protecting, and I intended to protect it. The administrative course helped me settle into a new rhythm. The classroom was small, the lighting soft, and students focused on their notebooks instead of each other. The instructor explained every concept in plain, steady language, how to structure communication, avoid misalignment, and create predictable routines. Nothing felt abstract. Each step had a practical use which made the material easier to absorb after months of instability. The course started on a Tuesday night. During the break, I spoke with a woman named Jenna. She lived a few blocks away and was taking the class for a promotion at her office. Our conversation stayed on surface-level topics: work hours, long commutes, the cost of groceries, the difficulty of adjusting to a new city. She did not try to guess anything about my private life, and she never asked questions that made me pause. Her steadiness made it easier to talk to her without worrying about what she might assume. Work shifted in small but noticeable ways that week. My supervisor assigned me to a pilot project tracking a new shipping route. The task required comparing incoming reports, marking inconsistencies, and updating 2 departments at once. It was the kind of job that rewarded accuracy instead of performance. I completed the first phase by midweek, sent the summary, and waited. She replied within minutes, thanking me and assigning me to the next stage. There was no hidden criticism, no backhanded comments, just confirmation that the work was solid. Meanwhile, the messages from home kept arriving. My mother asked when I planned to stop holding grudges, as if the entire situation depended on my reaction. My father said lawyers were unnecessary and implied I had escalated things without reason. Neither acknowledged the dinner. Neither referenced the actual issue. They focused only on the fallout, treating my distance as an inconvenience instead of a boundary. I replied only when needed, and when I did, the answers stayed short. Anything longer gave them space to twist the meaning. In the middle of the week, the heater in the duplex made a loud clicking sound. I expected the repair to turn into a drawn-out conversation the way it would have at home, but the landlord fixed it in less than 5 minutes. He checked the panel, tightened a loose part, and said, "It should be fine now. No follow-up questions, no commentary, no assumptions about my situation." He left as quickly as he arrived. The simplicity made the stability of this new life easier to recognize. By Friday, I had a routine that actually held work in the morning class on Tuesday and Thursday nights, and a weekend shift at the packaging company. The structure was basic, but it was reliable. I did not feel the familiar pressure to predict someone else's mood or handle problems I did not cause. On Saturday, Jenna and I were assigned to the same case study. She outlined the main points, I added the logistical details, and the plan came together without strain. After class, we walked to a small cafe nearby. She ordered tea and I ordered coffee. We talked without comparison or judgment. She said she understood the difficulty of rebuilding a life from scratch because she had done it once, moving states, starting over, cutting old expectations loose. It takes time to get used to a quiet life, she said. Not everyone understands that. The comment stayed with me longer than I expected. It was not emotional or dramatic, it was simply accurate. When I got home, the apartment felt steady. Not perfect, not permanent, but stable enough that I could sit down, close my eyes for a few minutes, and not feel pulled in different directions. For the first time in months, I had the start of a structure that belonged entirely to me. The foundation was small, but it held. The tension built slowly over the next few weeks. My parents continued posting vague messages online about missing their daughter and hoping she makes the right choices. None of the posts mentioned their comments at dinner. None included the reason I left. They wrote as if I had disappeared without warning, as if I had not been standing in the same kitchen when they told me I did not belong in the family. Each post felt like a public performance crafted for sympathy. On a Thursday evening, my phone buzzed with a call from a number I recognized but had not seen in years. It belonged to my Aunt Karen. She rarely contacted me when I lived in Iowa. She usually relied on my mother's version of every situation. Seeing her name on the screen told me she knew something. I let the call ring out and waited for the voicemail. When I played the message, her tone was tight with urgency. She said my parents had asked relatives to reach out and help convince me to come home. She said the family was getting worried about appearances. Then she added something that made me pause. "Everyone is asking who you think you are running off like this." Her words carried the same tone I knew well, disbelief mixed with judgment. Leaving without permission was offensive to them. Independence was treated as defiance. I set the phone down and took a slow breath. The comment replayed in my mind, "Who do you think you are?" The question was familiar. My parents had used variations of it for years. They asked for it when I applied for college. They asked for it when I insisted on paying my own tuition. They asked when I chose a logistics job instead of staying home to follow their expectations. The question always meant the same thing: stay small, stay predictable, stay where they could control me. The next day, a coworker named David stopped by my desk during lunch. He had noticed I seemed distracted at the morning meeting and asked if everything was all right. I told him I was dealing with family pressure but did not give specifics. He nodded and said that starting over in a new city often came with leftover issues from the past. His tone was neutral, not intrusive. The conversation helped settle my thoughts. That evening, I logged into the administrative course's online portal to finish an assignment. The topic focused on evaluating workplace structures and addressing inefficiencies professionally. The module explained how to separate emotional reactions from practical decisions. The timing felt appropriate. I completed the task and submitted it. As I reviewed the material, another message came from my brother. He wrote that he had spoken to our parents and that everyone deserves an explanation. He added a final sentence, "They think you are avoiding responsibility." The words reinforced why I left. Responsibility, in their view, meant serving as the financial foundation for the household without acknowledgement or boundaries. I placed the phone face down and opened my notebook. I wrote out the recent interactions, the posts, the messages, the phone calls, the assumptions. Seeing everything on paper made it easier to understand the pattern. They were not trying to fix anything. They were trying to restore the old dynamic. That realization made the next decision easier to shape. On Saturday morning, Jenna texted asking if I wanted to meet for coffee. I agreed. We met at a cafe near the bus stop. She ordered a latte and I ordered tea. We sat at a small corner table. She asked about classwork and whether I had explored more of Seattle yet. Our conversation stayed practical and grounded. At one point, she mentioned her experience leaving a difficult family situation years earlier. She said distance helped her understand what she could and could not control. Her comment matched what I had been sorting through in the duplex. After coffee, I walked through a nearby market. Vendors sold fruit-packaged foods and handmade crafts. The environment was busy but calm. People navigated the space without conflict. I bought apples and a container of soup for later. The simple act of choosing what to buy without commentary felt grounding. That afternoon, I received another call from Aunt Karen. This time I answered. She asked where I was living. I told her I was safe and working. She said my parents were telling relatives I had abandoned them. She asked what she should say to calm everyone down. I responded that the truth was simple. I left because of how I was treated. She paused, then asked what that meant. I repeated the facts clearly. She went silent again before saying, "Your mother said you misunderstood everything." Her tone shifted from curiosity to defense. The conversation exposed something familiar. People who had not been present felt entitled to define the situation. That dynamic existed for years. Relatives formed opinions based on my parents' version of events. It had never mattered whether their version matched reality. After the call, I stepped outside and walked around the block. The air was cold and the sidewalk was quiet. I passed a dog walker, a cyclist, and an older couple carrying groceries. None of them knew me. None expected anything. The absence of pressure helped my breathing steady. When I returned, I checked my email and saw a message from a nonprofit organization I had applied to months earlier, the one I almost forgot about. They needed someone to help restructure their inventory system and coordinate deliveries. The role included health insurance and opportunities for advancement. They scheduled an interview for the following Thursday. The timing aligned perfectly with the administrative course. This job could shift everything. Over the next few days, I prepared for the interview. I reviewed past projects, updated my notes, and organized examples of logistics solutions I had developed. The preparation felt orderly. It did not carry fear or urgency. It simply required discipline. On Wednesday night, another message from my mother arrived. She wrote that my behavior was disrespectful and that I was hurting the family. She said people were talking. She said relatives were asking questions. She ended with, "Who do you think you are to treat us this way?" The question appeared again, almost exactly as Aunt Karen had said it. I reread the message twice. The familiar pattern was undeniable. My leaving had challenged their control, not their concern. The reaction was not worrying. It was an offense. Thursday morning, I put on a clean blouse, tied my hair back, and reviewed the interview agenda. The bus ride took 20 minutes. The building was modest with clear signage and a small lobby. The program director met me at the door. She explained the role, the expectations, and the goals of the project. Her questions focused on skills and experience. I answered each one directly. The conversation stayed professional and structured. When the interview ended, she said they would contact me within the week. On the ride home, my brother texted again. He said the family was gathering at my parents' house that evening and that they wanted me on a video call to clear things up. He wrote that relatives wanted answers. He added that my behavior had become a topic of concern. I typed a direct reply, "I will not participate." He responded with a single sentence, "They are asking who you think you are." I set the phone aside and looked out the bus window. The city passed by in steady shapes and colors. Buildings, streetlights, people moving with purpose. The question no longer created pressure. It clarified something instead. For the first time, I knew exactly who I was without their definition. I was rebuilding piece by piece. The distance grew because I put it there. Their influence no longer reached me. The conversation they wanted would not happen. The shift in power started there. Seattle's winter rain had settled into a steady rhythm when the notification appeared on my phone. I was sitting in the small kitchen finishing edits on a logistics proposal when the screen lit up with a familiar name. Someone had tagged me in a public Facebook post. I opened it without hesitation. It was an old photo me on the front porch in a blue sweater, smiling in a way that did not match the person I had become. The caption underneath read, "Please, if anyone sees her, tell her we need her home. We are worried and want her safe." The post ignored everything that mattered. No mention of the dinner, no mention of the years I covered their bills. Nothing about the way they dismissed me the moment I was no longer useful. They had rewritten the situation as a story of a daughter who vanished, not a daughter who walked away for her own sanity. I read through the comments with a steady pulse. No anger, no guilt, just clarity. They were trying to resurrect the version of me in that photo, the cooperative one who absorbed every burden without pushing back. I closed the app for a moment. The apartment around me stayed still. It did not demand anything. It did not pull at me the way the Fairpoint house always did. When I reopened my laptop, I created a new social media account under a neutral name. It gave me a way to watch what they were doing without alerting anyone. Within an hour, the post had spread further. Neighbors shared it with sympathy. Old classmates added comments. People who barely knew me wrote short messages about praying for my safety. The narrative was clean, dramatic, and convenient: a missing daughter, grieving parents, a community coming together. None of it matched reality. I took screenshots of every thread, a habit I had built since arriving in Seattle, document everything, and protect the truth before someone else rewrites it. As the post gained traction, reporters from small local outlets picked it up. My parents replied to comments with vague statements repeating that they were worried. Then they added something new, something they had never said to me in my entire life, that I had always been emotionally fragile. Their responses grew more polished with each interaction, as if they had practiced the lines. My father wrote, She has always carried a lot on her shoulders. We just want to help her get through this." I read it twice. The self-serving tone was unmistakable. By evening, Ethan joined the thread. "Please come home," he wrote. No apology, no acknowledgement of the dinner, no attempt to reach me privately. Just a public plea that served the narrative. I closed the thread and stepped outside. The Seattle air was cold but steady. I walked down the block until the noise in my head settled. My family did not miss me. They missed what I provided. The post was less about concern and more about losing their stability. Halfway through the walk, my phone vibrated. A message from someone I barely remembered from high school. "Are you safe?" "I won't tell anyone," you replied. I answered honestly and briefly, "I am safe. I left because I needed to." She promised to keep it private. Back in the apartment, I checked the new account again. Someone finally asked the question no one else wanted to touch. "Has anyone considered why she left?" My mother responded with a long, defensive paragraph that said nothing. Other commenters brushed off the question quickly. It was easier for them to keep the story simple. Nothing in the thread surprised me. Selective truth, emotional performance, carefully crafted sympathy. It all fit. I closed the laptop and went back to my proposal. The numbers on the screen were stable, predictable, objective. They grounded me better than anything else that day. Later that night, I sat at the edge of my mattress and looked around the room. The space was small, but it was mine. No one could call it ungrateful. No one could twist it into proof of failure. No one could claim ownership over it. The post kept spreading, but so did the distance between us. They had an audience. I had autonomy. The boundary was clear now, and they no longer knew how to navigate it. I finally intended to keep it. The email arrived late on a Wednesday night while I was updating inventory reports for a regional supplier. My laptop screen glowed in the dim room, and the apartment was quiet except for the sound of rain tapping the metal fire escape outside the window. I almost ignored the notification, assuming it was another automated message or job alert. Then I saw the sender's name, Ethan Hale. I stared at it for a few seconds before opening it. "Madison, I do not know what happened. Mom and Dad think you are being stubborn. I think something is wrong. If you get this, please tell me you are safe." The message did not include an apology. It did not mention the dinner. It did not acknowledge the comments made at my expense or the fact that he had stayed silent while they happened. The tone was cautious, distant, and filtered. It reminded me of someone trying to complete an assignment. I read it twice, then closed the tab. There was no urgency in his words. There was no regret. He did not ask why I left. He did not ask how I was managing. He asked for reassurance, nothing more. I waited 20 minutes before responding. The reply was short. "I am safe. I need distance right now." I sent it and shut the laptop. The next morning he replied with another email. Longer. Still formal. "Mom has been crying. Dad is stressed. They say you left without warning. They said you were overwhelmed. Can you explain what happened? I want to understand." The request sounded reasonable, but I knew the truth behind it. He had already chosen a side. He wanted the version of the story that matched what they had told him. He wanted me to fill in the narrative gap so he could stop feeling uneasy. He wanted clarity without confronting responsibility. I typed slowly. "I will explain when you are able to acknowledge the dinner and your part in it." I sent it and went to work. During my shift, I checked my phone only once. He had not responded. That silence lasted 3 days. On the 4th day, he finally sent a new message. "I remember the dinner. I did not say anything because it happened fast. I did not know what to say. I should have spoken up. It was not accountable. It was convenient. The difference mattered." I wrote back, "You did not say anything because you did not want to disrupt the comfort of the room. That is not confusion. That is a choice." He did not reply for several hours. When he finally did, the tone had shifted again. "You are right. I should not have stayed quiet." No excuses, no deflection, just a single sentence that did not erase what happened, but acknowledged it without denial. For the first time since I left, I felt something close to relief. Not forgiveness, but recognition. The next message he sent was unexpected. "Can I see you?" I sat with that question for a long time. He was the only person in my family who might be capable of listening without twisting the story to protect pride. but meeting too soon could unravel the progress I had made. I answered before overthinking it. Not yet, but maybe soon. After sending it, I shut my phone off and stepped outside. The rain had stopped, leaving the air cool and heavy. The neighborhood felt calm. No one knew who I was or what I was dealing with. I walked 2 blocks to the corner store and bought hot tea. The simple walk cleared my head. When I returned, my phone showed another message. I understand. I will wait. The next week, I woke to a new tone from him, less formal, more honest. Madison. I know Mom and Dad are telling everyone that you are unstable. I have heard them say it to relatives. I want you to know I do not believe that. I read the sentence again. It was the first time anyone from Fairpoint had contradicted my parents' narrative. It did not fix the past, but it showed effort. Later that afternoon, another message came. I have been thinking about the years you helped the family. I did not realize how much you covered. Mom said you only sent money sometimes, but I checked their old bank statements when I visited. You were the one keeping everything afloat. I did not know. I should have known. This was new information. He had looked into something on his own. He had not relied on their version. For the first time, he was examining the situation with accuracy instead of assumption. I wrote back simply, "Thank you for checking." He responded within minutes. "I want to know the real story. All of it, not the one they are giving me." I sat at the small table in the apartment's kitchen and considered how to begin. Instead of sending a long explanation, I asked one question. "Do you accept that I left because of how I was treated, not because I was unstable?" His answer arrived almost immediately. "Yes, I do." That was the point where communication shifted. The next few exchanges felt more like a conversation between adults instead of siblings stuck in old habits. We spoke about the night of the dinner. He admitted he had been uncomfortable, but did not intervene because he assumed Mom and Dad did not mean it seriously. I told him that impact mattered more than intention. He agreed. It was the first time we aligned on something without tension. He explained that he had not reached out earlier because he felt guilty and unsure of whether I wanted to hear from him. I told him the truth, that silence carried its own message. By the end of the day, he asked again, "Can we meet not to fix anything, just to talk?" This time my answer changed. Yes, we chose a public place halfway between Fairpoint and Seattle, a cafe in Spokane. The trip was long, but I preferred distance from anything familiar. He said he did not mind the drive. On the morning of the meeting, I left early. The road was clear, the sky overcast, and traffic lights. During the entire drive, my mind stayed practical. I was not going there for reconciliation. I was not going there to repair childhood memories. I wanted clarity, nothing more. I arrived first and sat at a small table near the window. The cafe smelled like dark, roast-warm spices and a hint of the crisp autumn air outside. People came in for takeaway orders. A barista wiped down the counter every few minutes. It was the kind of place where no one stared long enough to form opinions. 10 minutes later, Ethan walked in. He looked older than I remembered, more tired. The confidence he carried during his trip back from Canada was gone. When he saw me, he raised a hand awkwardly and came over. We sat down. Neither of us spoke right away. He broke the silence. "Thank you for meeting me." I nodded. He told me he had replayed the dinner in his mind many times. He said he wanted to believe Mom and Dad were joking, but deep down he knew they were serious. He admitted that staying silent was easier than challenging them. He said he hated that choice now. I listened without interrupting. He talked about growing up in a house where confrontation was rare. He said our parents avoided admitting fault even in small things. He explained that leaving for Canada insulated him from the daily tension I lived with. He said he had not realized how much weight I carried because he was not there to witness it. His voice stayed steady, not dramatic, not emotional, just factual. When he finished, he looked at me. "You did not deserve any of it." The directness caught me off guard. There was no attempt to soften the statement, no qualifiers, just a clear acknowledgement. I told him why I left. I described the years of financial pressure, the dismissiveness, the expectation that I would absorb every responsibility without acknowledgement. I explained that it was not one moment but a pattern, one that ended at that dinner. He listened fully. No defensive reactions, no minimizing statements, no interruptions. When I was done, he nodded. "Thank you for telling me. I will not ask you to go back." It was the first time someone from my family showed respect for my boundaries. We spent the next hour discussing practical things, what he planned to do with his career, where he and his fiancée hoped to live, and how he intended to address our parents' narrative. He told me he planned to correct anyone who repeated the unstable story. I told him that was his choice, not his obligation. Before we left, he asked one final question. "Can we stay in contact? I want to be better than before." I answered honestly, "Yes, but on terms that do not repeat old patterns." He accepted without hesitation. When I drove back to Seattle that evening, the air felt lighter. Not because anything was fixed, but because one part of my past was no longer twisted. My brother was capable of change. That did not rewrite the harm, but it adjusted the future. The distance I built was still necessary, but now it included someone on the other side who understood why it existed. Patricia called me early on a Monday. Her tone was direct. When I arrived at her office, she laid out printed screenshots of my parents' newest posts. The wording described me as unwell and acting out of character. They implied I was unstable, not independent. "They are using this narrative to gain sympathy," she said, "and they are rewriting the story to pressure you into returning or resuming payments." She explained my options. Ignore it. Send a formal notice or take further legal action if they escalated. I chose the notice. I did not want a public fight. I just wanted the misrepresentation to stop. Patricia drafted a letter stating 3 points clearly: I was legally independent and not under their care. Their public posts contained false information that harmed my reputation. Further misrepresentation could lead to legal action. No drama, no emotion, just boundaries. That week, the tone from home changed. My mother sent a long message accusing me of overreacting by involving a lawyer. My father said I was twisting the situation. Neither acknowledged their comments at dinner. Neither apologized. Neither acknowledged the problem. Neither took responsibility for any part of what happened. I forwarded everything to Patricia. Meanwhile, work stayed steady. My supervisor approved the newest phase of the pilot project, and my schedule stayed stable. The predictability helped me stay focused. A few days later, Ethan called. He said our parents were upset but quieter. They knew the letter meant they could not keep posting. "They are not saying it out loud," he said, but the notice stopped them. The pressure finally eased. By the end of the month, my phone had fewer messages, fewer missed calls, and no new posts to monitor. The legal boundary worked exactly the way it was supposed to, calmly and effectively. It did not fix the relationship, but it stopped the noise. The email from Ethan arrived just after sunrise. He wrote that he planned to visit Seattle over the weekend and wanted to know if I had time. I answered yes, without hesitation. Our conversations had grown more honest over the months, and the distance between us no longer felt strained. When Saturday came, I met him at the same bus station where I had first arrived with one suitcase. He stepped off wearing a heavier jacket, this time more prepared for the weather, and his expression carried none of the confusion I had seen in the early weeks. We walked to a small diner near the station, a place with basic booths and quiet corners that allowed real conversations. After we ordered, he looked across the table and said, "They have cooled down. It took weeks, but the house is quieter. They barely talk about you now." "That does not change what happened," I said. "I know. I am not saying it does. I just wanted to tell you things are not exploding every day anymore." The server brought coffee. Steam drifted between us. Ethan took a sip and set his cup down carefully. "They started handling their own bills again," he added. "Mom complained at first, but they figured it out. They had no choice. That was the unspoken truth." He went on. "They've also stopped asking me to talk you into coming home." "That is good." "They still think you acted too fast," he said. "But they also know you are not going to change your mind." He studied my face as if checking whether he should continue. "Say it," I told him. "They blame each other now," Ethan said. "They take turns bringing it up. Dad says Mom pushed too hard. Mom says he started it. They will not admit any of it to you, but that is what I hear when they argue." I did not react. Blame was easier for them than accountability. It always has been. We ate quietly for a few minutes. The diner was calm, filled with older couples and a few families. No one looked at us or listened to our conversation. I had forgotten how it felt to speak openly in a place where I was not known by anyone else. After breakfast, we walked through the neighborhood. Ethan stopped in front of a bookstore and looked through the window. "You seem settled," he said. "Different from the last time I was here. I am more stable than I have been in years." He nodded. "I can see that." We entered the bookstore, wandered through the aisles, and browsed without speaking. When we left, he asked a question that sounded cautious. "Are you planning to visit home at some point?" "Not to stay, just to visit." "I do not know," I said plainly. "There is no plan." "That makes sense." We walked another block before he spoke again. "You should know something else," he said. "They cleaned out your room." It did not surprise me. When, a few weeks ago, they turned it into storage, Mom packed your things and put them in the basement. Things, clothes I bought myself, paperwork I kept organized for years, items that did not matter enough for them to ask if I wanted them back. "Do you want any of it?" he asked. "Not really. There was one box with older stuff, school papers, a few books, not much. I can bring it next time if you want." "That is fine." Ethan looked relieved. "Good. I thought maybe it would upset you." "It does not." We reached the hill that overlooked the waterfront. The sky was clear, and ferries moved across the water in steady lines. People walked, dogs jogged, or carried coffee cups. It was the kind of environment that made it easy to breathe. Ethan leaned on the railing. "It feels different here," he said. "I see why you stayed. It is quieter. And you are not carrying anyone." "No," I said. "I am not." He took his hands out of his pockets. "I have been thinking about things from before, stuff I did not really notice growing up." I waited. When Mom said those things at dinner, I did not say anything. I told myself it was not my place. But it was cruel. It was obvious. I just sat there. "It was not your responsibility to fix them," I said. "But I could have done something. You were used to the routine. That was the problem." He nodded slowly. "I am starting to recognize that." A family walked past us laughing. A child dropped a glove, and the mother picked it up without breaking stride. Ordinary moments, simple tasks, nothing that drained anyone. I turned back to Ethan. "How are things with your fiancé?" He shrugged. "She keeps asking what really happened." I told her the truth. "She thinks Mom was unfair. She thinks Dad made it worse. She thinks I need to separate from the house a little." "That sounds accurate." "She wants us to move out next year," he said. "Not far, just into our own place." "That is a good plan." "I think so too." He looked at me with a steadier expression than I had ever seen from him. "I'm trying to live differently." "That is good," I said. "That is the point." We walked back toward my apartment, stopping at a corner bakery for pastries. Ethan insisted on paying. I did not argue. It was a small gesture, but it carried meaning. When we reached my building, we climbed the stairs to my unit. He set his backpack down and looked around. "You have made it feel like home," he said. "I kept it simple on purpose. It works." He sat on the edge of the futon while I made tea. When I handed him a mug, he took it with both hands. "Do you think things will ever be normal again?" he asked. "Not the old version of normal," I said. "Something new, maybe. Something that does not cost me everything." He considered that. "I can accept that." He left in the late afternoon to catch the bus back. Before he closed the door, he turned and said, "I am proud of you." It landed quietly without pressure or theatrics, a factual statement, a simple truth. After he left, I cleaned the small kitchen, wiped the counter, and opened the window to let in the cold air. The streetlights clicked on and traffic moved steadily below. My phone buzzed. A message from Patricia. Update. Your parents received the formal notice. No new posts, no new comments. Activity has stopped. I put the phone down and looked at the quiet apartment. A year earlier, the house in Iowa had been filled with demands, criticism, and expectations. Every conversation had revolved around what I should be doing, paying, or fixing. Every day felt like maintenance for other people. Now I lived in a space that held none of that weight. The room stayed still. The air was clean. There were no voices telling me what I owed. This was not revenge in the dramatic sense. It was a simple distance. It was the result of choosing myself instead of a role that drained me. It was stability created by removing myself from a system that never changed. For the first time in years, I felt in control, and nothing in that moment felt temporary. The email from the legal office came early in the morning. The case was closed. No follow-up needed, no new filings, and no more statements from my parents. I read the message twice, set the phone down, and let the quiet settle. The legal finality felt less like a victory and more like the quiet expiration of a long, costly lease. My apartment felt steady. It was not luxurious, but everything in it was mine. My groceries, my routines, my bills, my choices. I was not covering anyone else's responsibilities anymore, and no one expected me to fix problems I did not create. This new stability was not merely a state of being, it was the result of consistent, conscious effort to value my own needs over their demands. Around noon, I walked to the market, bought fruit, and headed home. The store owner greeted me by name. The simple recognition grounded me more than I expected. In Fairpoint, my identity was inherited. Here it was observed and acknowledged daily. When I checked the mailbox, I found the package Ethan had sent, the last box of things from my old room. Inside were a few notebooks, 2 photos, and a certificate. I kept what mattered and threw out the rest. The emotional weight surprisingly stayed with the packaging. Ethan texted a few minutes later. "Did the box arrive?" "Yes. How are you today, Steady?" "Good. Same here. No pressure, no expectations. Communication that did not drain me. It was the kind of honest, low-stakes exchange that proved he had changed his approach. In the afternoon, I walked by the water for an hour. I focused on the tangible reality of the city around me, the sound of the light rail, the structured chaos of traffic, the determined pace of the people. Nothing about it resembled Fairpoint, and that distance finally felt like closure. It was the kind of separation that made sense, not dramatic, just necessary. I walked until the feeling solidified my decisions now belonged entirely to my future, not my past. My mother called once that evening. I let it ring. No voicemail. I left it alone. The ring itself was just noise now stripped of its old power. I cooked dinner, cleaned the kitchen, and sat by the window with a book. The apartment stayed quiet. No demands, no shifting moods, no tension waiting for me at the end of the day. Just a life I shaped myself. Before bed, I opened my notebook and wrote one line: I did not disappear. I just stepped into a life that finally made sense. The truth was, the greatest change wasn't the city or the job. It was the shift in control. I had walked away from the expectation that I had to justify my basic need for dignity. For anyone reading this, remember that the silence you choose can be the loudest affirmation of your worth. Sometimes the most important boundary is the one you place between yourself and the noise of their expectations. It was the clearest summary of everything that happened, and it was enough.